Oh yes, I had this mystical experience. One night I was kneeling down fervently praying to God, and all of a sudden I had this epiphany. I realized I was talking to myself, which made me God. I was praying to God.
Well, I'd like to thank all of you for being here. This is something we're putting together. Dr. Bohr is a friend of mine, and we've done some things on radio, things for our class, Psychology of Religion. I'm Jim Skalicky. I teach at Seekers College, Psychology of Religion, some other classes. But today we're going to focus on the idea of consciousness. We're here at Coco's in Arcadia. Thank them for allowing us to have this little secret room here to discuss consciousness. I have some friends, relatives behind the camera. My brother John, I'm sure he'll come in after, right, John? And Greg, Rick, Dr. Brown here, and Lou Ornelas. He is Dr. Verne Bohr, a PhD in neurophysiology, and also an MD, a psychiatrist. And Verne, I know in other video we've done, and on radio, I don't know if you'd said on radio, but you described yourself as a materialist. Now, I'm going to hold you to give us a definition so my students and those looking at us can have an understanding of what you mean by that.
That's a heavy. It means that I believe in the material world and things beyond that. I feel many of it is airy-fairy. The soul, if I talk about something on the bottom of my shoe, I can understand that. I can touch it, I can feel it, I can smell it if I want. But when you talk about the concept of something that does not have any material form and supposedly exists beyond our death, I have problems with that.
Ken Wilber, who we talk about in our class, he's a transpersonal psychologist, quotes a man by the name of George Spencer Brown, who a few years ago wrote a book on the laws of form. And the question I pose to my students, and it's really sort of a simple answer with far-reaching implications. The question is, if you were to start a universe, what's absolutely essential for everything in the universe from the macro to the micro? Now, I won't ask you to give me the answer. I'll give you the answer. What they say is that in order to have a universe, it's absolutely essential to have an inner and an outer. So everything has an inner and an outer. You can't get away from that. You have to think about that. Now, the question is, are you saying that consciousness is just sort of an inner, inside brain activity, and outside of that inner animals, inner plants, there's really no consciousness?
No, I think there is consciousness. I think that I think it arises, however, from something material. The brain is just a hunk of meat, but it's a hunk of meat that its byproduct is consciousness. It's sort of like, let's analogize to the liver. Bile is a product of liver. Liver is a functioning organ, but the bile is not. It's the end product. And of course, we're tackling something that scholars from time immemorial have struggled with.
No, I'm saying that you can describe an organ as generating something, like say bile or tears, and you can experience objectively the product of that organ.
It's something material producing something material.
Okay.
Whereas the brain
Producing
is something
observed.
material,
Producing the
and
non-material.
I'm postulating that is producing something called consciousness,
Right.
which you can't measure,
That's right.
can't touch,
That's
And meaningless
Well,
illusions
you-
at
you-
time also.
You
something
certainly
like that.
cannot make an objective observation of it.
No, you
Right, so you
can't.
can only experience it. Or consciousness is only known through the experience of it.
However,
It's not-
you can put electrodes to certain parts of the brain that will give some visual,
Well,
auditory, or
oh,
something like
But
that.
what that will give you is only give you information about brain activity.
Right.
And then you have to conclude from that, or infer from that consciousness correlates with it.
In the Christian world, Western world, there's a shadow that they often don't want to look at. And I think it comes sort of mixed, doesn't it, in terms of whether there's some pros about socialism and some real cons. So I think everything comes with a shadow side. There's a opposite. I don't know if we can get anything that doesn't have the opposite side to it.
I would agree. I recently wrote a little essay on the God of the Old Testament. You know, talking about the yin and the yang. He was not a very nice guy. In fact, killed a lot of people. And that's the dark side. I think in Christianity, the dark side are things like the religious wars, certainly the Inquisition, killing people that don't believe the way you do. I think that, however, as far as one other comment that maybe I didn't finish, St. Paul talked about faith. And I think when you deal with belief systems about consciousness, St. Paul said faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Now that's pretty airy-fairy. And but I think that even in science, which I dabbled in for a while, you have to have faith, you know, that your measuring systems are okay and working, and that your paradigm really is covering what you're examining.
Verne, would you say then that science does have its limits?
Yeah, I think so.
Even beyond that, I think when you're measuring something, how do you interpret the data that you're collecting?
Yes.
The problem is that you're interpreting that data with your own consciousness.
Yes.
The very thing that some people deny even exists, like Michael Shermer, or I don't, again, I don't know if I go as far as saying that he denies that consciousness exists at all, but he certainly doesn't like to talk about it. And so we have to realize that everything is perceptual. We perceive the world in a certain way, and then we draw conclusions based upon the perception, not necessarily based upon the way the world really is.
But I agree.
are-
We see things through the glasses which are our experience.
Isn't that what Schumer says in there?
Yeah, yes, that,
We have a belief first.
yes, we,
So would you agree
You
with
wanna- you
that
wanna
then?
believe-
That what is primary, what comes first is actually consciousness, not the real world? See, in the beginning you said you believe in the material world, right? So you start with the material, and those are two different views, and essentially what I'm describing is how you can put two people in different camps, And the main camps are the materialists that believe in external reality as being the primary reality, and others that believe that consciousness is what you start with, and then based upon what you perceive, you make an assumption about the external world as existing.
Now,
as separate
isn't
from
it
other.
possible to combine the two? Can the spiritual world and
Bit
the
of
world of
middle.
science come together and create a new paradigm for the future? Is that possible?
Is consciousness, there has to be a consciousness to believe in things, because there are people who mentally aren't able to comprehend things, and their consciousness is totally different than what.
So you're talking about the range of consciousness?
Yeah.
Do you mean in terms of IQ, perception,
Perception.
That
total
may be a good
awareness,
time to
to
maybe define the consciousness, because
Okay.
there are different definitions of it.
So Verne,
Maybe that's a good
what's your
time to-
definition of consciousness? We don't mean like being unconscious,
No,
where
unconscious.
you're
Right.
knocked out and you're now
Right.
unconscious. We're talking about a consciousness, an awareness, a depth of understanding, a kind of wisdom of the self. And we're assuming that animals, at least some animals, don't have a sense of that they're going to die. As human beings, we're aware. Maybe that comes as a mixed blessing in some ways.
Yeah.
They have a consciousness, but in awareness, but are they aware of some of the things, the future and the sense of self and that sort of thing?
Some people who are maybe mentally retarded or something are not conscious of death in a sense. So they're not concerned about their guilt. They're not concerned about being good or being bad. But so that consciousness is totally different than you or I, because we, as who are capable of looking at that, can make a big decision whether we want to be good or bad.
Well, and if you carry that to another level, when we talk, again, going back to the mystics, who claim to have this experience that surpasses our ordinary awareness, where do we put our credence in terms of what's real?
But even this idea of living by what's good or bad depends upon our belief system.
What's
Belief
good
system.
or bad?
Absolutely. For certainly a militant Muslim, it might be good, totally good, to kill Christians.
Sure.
Or someone that does not believe. This is all filtered through our background experience. But what is consciousness? Maybe Descartes' idea that I think, therefore I am.
However,
The thinking
recently, yes, but many, I guess, postmoderns, no, I would just say maybe the mystics would say I am, therefore I think, rather I think, therefore I am, right? I mean,
Both.
would the mystics say it that way?
But I think first we need to
That's
clarify
your
what I think we need to clarify what we're talking about, because there are certainly different levels of consciousness.
Okay, but
And
before we do that, let's clarify this. The idea of I think, therefore I am, or is it I am, the I amness, and therefore I think?
What-
That's
what-
getting back to what
the-
Greg said, because this I amness exists.
Yeah.
You can't say this person doesn't think, so they are not.
Yeah.
they don't think. So there is an I amness, and therefore I think to some level.
Well,
So what is this I am?
Descartes' meaning, I think, therefore I am, is that I have an experience, and therefore it's essentially an argument for consciousness. I have based upon the fact that I have an experience, I must be conscious. There must be an experience. Someone
So
doing it.
then perhaps he
And
should have said
therefore-
I experience. Therefore,
Well, that's
I
what he
think.
meant. That's
Okay,
what the statement really means. I think, therefore, I am. I have an idea. I have thoughts. It doesn't matter what form those thoughts may take, whether it's an image or generating a concept, whatever, or just having an experience. That essentially builds an argument for consciousness.
Okay, so
as
getting back to
existing.
what Greg's question was, then we would say that a living thing has some reflexive intelligence to some degree, because an animal an amoeba may have reflexive intelligence, but we bring it to a certain level, and where is it then a person who may have a lower IQ, they have a consciousness and they're aware. And they're
Maybe that-
experiencing,
Right.
but maybe not cognitively fully developed.
Or
Yeah,
persistent
correct, yeah.
vegetative state.
Which is,
Well,
As in being in a coma.
someone in a coma, but they have reflexes. You can run a key across the bottom of their foot, they will move, and that is a question.
And it-
They certainly are reactive. Do they think? I don't
would
know.
there be a difference between consciousness and awareness? Like an animal's aware of things, but doesn't
I
mean
see-
he's conscious of it.
That's why I define consciousness as being the state of being aware. It's
Well,
a very fundamental way of
Well,
defining
let's
consciousness.
focus in
and then
on
you
that.
can build
Let's
upon that.
let's try to clearly define what
Yeah.
we mean by consciousness.
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
Verne, you want to help us with this?
Well, this is one that people have tackled through the centuries, and I'm not certain I'm smart enough to unravel it. But what is... Yeah, I would say consciousness is awareness of our environment and being interactive with our environment. The ability to be interactive with our environment.
Or even the potential ability, perhaps?
Yes,
that potential is there.
Yes, I have a little problem with that.
Problem with that definition, though, is that you would have to be a lot inclusive, and you would have to include certain plants. Sunflowers, for example.
Or a Venus
which are-
flytrap.
Sure, exactly. And they're certainly reactive. So are we to say that they're conscious?
Say that in the universe, talking about the universe having an inner and an outer, two words come to mind. Balance, very important, or balancing in the universe. And the other word is continuum. Do we find most things to be in some sense of a balance when we look at the universe? And do we also see a continuum, whether it's colors, whether it's consciousness? Would those be two good words to sort of consider as important building blocks to what we're talking
Okay,
about?
so we could talk about consciousness, for example,
In a
as being
continuum.
continuous.
Yes, as a continuum.
Um,
And maybe even beyond our awareness now.
Yeah, so we could ask questions such as, is a slug conscious, or is an amoeba conscious, and these kind of things? Do they have a minimum of consciousness that we could talk about? Or is there a defining line, a defining limit or boundary that you must cross in order to suddenly
Well, and
qualify
where
as
does that
conscious?
aha, when did it happen with human beings? Neanderthals, when they maybe buried some tools and things. Was this a beginning of awareness?
We're talking about defining consciousness in terms of a reaction, but that is exactly what a reaction is, something that's measurable.
Okay.
Yes, and I
Therefore-
think
So we
I
need
think
measure.
that when you say an amoeba reacts, it definitely reacts. Is there any awareness within the amoeba that is
reacting.
doing that? I think consciousness is the ability to respond to your environment and awareness that one is responding.
An animal, if an animal comes up to a bush and hears noises on the other side of it, he has an awareness that there's something back there
Yes.
that could be dangerous. A human comes up, he has consciousness, and he can rationalize. There might be something there, there might not be. It might be a real noise, it might be an animal, it might just be a noise.
The question is, are we aware of everybody else's consciousness, or are we aware of our own consciousness to the point where we see something, and okay, if I see you and you talk to me, then you gotta have a conscience.
But there's no way to prove it.
But
I
no
mean,
way-
that-
But
we
that's
can
a
only
very good point.
assume.
That's a good point, though, because the truth is, really, we only know in our conscious.
No,
But we
yeah.
assume because I have it, that you have it too. You
That's
look like
right.
me.
And
That's the great
That's
point.
the thing with the animals. We know that the animals exist there, but we have no idea what they're thinking or what they will run out into the street and get run over. Well, we won't do that simply because we know the results of that action. So
Yeah,
how
But-
can you measure conscience unless you're measuring your own conscience?
that's the only one you can
You know,
measure.
you can
really.
only measure your own
Well,
conscience.
that's the only one you can be aware. And that's what Descartes was saying, in a way. I think, therefore, I am. I'm very sure of the fact that I have an experience, I know I'm conscious, but I do not know that you are. I can only
Exactly.
assume that you are.
You know,
And that is,
and
we
that-
have to make this leap of faith all the time.
I'm thinking that most animals do the nests the way they've done nests for thousands, millions of years, where the human animal, we build houses in different ways. And so I'm wondering this idea that Ken Wilber loves so much is including and transcending. So that it seems like the human consciousness has the ability to include our animal nature, so to speak, and then transcend it in some sense, whether it's technology or even thought processes. And I'm wondering if that comes into play somehow, that and consciousness, we include, and there's a movement toward transcending, or maybe you would even call it mental evolution. I mean, from the basic material in evolution, that there would be an evolution of materials into consciousness onto whatever evolves
What's
thousands of years
interesting
from
about
now.
that is that if we could show that there is such a thing as a continuum for consciousness, then we could extrapolate higher up and see what could that lead to a kind of
And I think that's what Ken
Or-
Wilber talks about in his levels, the idea of including and transcending, that there seems to be this integrative kind of model that incorporates all and realizes that this is what the universe seems to do, to include and continuous to transcend. So you project that into a million years and you say, what would that look like? Well, you know, I think that
Yeah.
one psychologist defined IQ as the ability to survive. And I think that's pretty good. that when you think about it, maybe that's the bottom line, whether it's a plant or an animal or humans, and even in the theology, the idea is we're going to survive beyond this. So maybe central is this idea of surviving.
The brain evolved to enable us to survive, and therefore the brain is really not designed to really answer the kind of questions that we're asking around, here, or the big questions. The brain is not designed to really go beyond its limits, which is essentially basic survival. So we're using basic logic, which has evolved as a means to increase our survival value, and now we're trying to push those boundaries to really answer really existential questions, or questions, really deep questions like
But I mean, I
consciousness.
think that's what we do. I mean,
we'll have
500
to
years
indulge in that
ago,
kind of thing.
yeah, and I think
Yeah.
if we didn't do that, I mean, that's very unique. That if we didn't do that, where will we be? I mean, the science of 500 years ago is certainly different than the proof, the beliefs, even maybe 100 years ago. I think, was it in the 20s that there was just very few people in physics, they sort of thought, well, we know all we need to know about the atom, and basically that's it.
Oh, yes.
And-
Around 1900, there were physicists that said there's no more to be discovered.
What my argument for that would be is that our brain is programmed to survive, but we're using that for other means now. We're using it for other to do other things. So you could call that an epiphenomenon.
What are the other things?
Well, they're asking the kind of questions that we are asking
But
about.
aren't these survival questions in some ways? I mean, even the sense of well-being, to have a knowledge, to know. You know, Thomas Aquinas said there are 3 pleasures in life. He said, can you guess them? He said one was
To know.
Sex.
sex. Very good. You can use this in my sex class. Well, the other is to enjoy food, the pleasure of food. And the third is learning. So
Something
you
spiritual.
you didn't get too excited about that.
But-
But of the 3, I mean, you look at the first 2, the sex is pleasurable, and you really can't go back to it. The food is pleasurable, you can't go back to it. But learning is very sweet, and you can go back to it. You can include and transcend, and there's a sweetness, there's a well-being. So not only is it to survive, but it's to survive with a sense of wellness.
But I would argue that learning has a definite evolutionary advantage. So the reason why we enjoy learning is because it has an evolutionary advantage. It's just that now we're indulging in it because we're deriving the pleasure out of it. There's reward in learning, and the reason why there's reward in learning is because in the past
Yes.
it allows us to survive.
Well,
It
people
does have
were
an impact.
always, years
Greg.
ago, we're a lot smaller. We get bigger. Our brains get bigger. Our brains get smarter. We learn more as we go along.
IQ is going up. They call it the Flynn effect.
No, I was going to say that everything that we do at this moment has a benefit in our mind, because eventually, you're going to die, and then it has no more benefit.
Well,
But if you do something right now, it has a benefit for now, not for the
Well,
future.
that's a really nice sort of closure on this, because the importance of living in the now is something that I say almost at every class in my psychology of religion. There's no place to go, just a place to be.
Yeah.
So be here now.
Be here.
And what do I mean by that? Because I think when you're in college, sometimes you think, well, I've got to do this and that, all these future, and we don't really fully live in the now. We don't have complete experience. And I think when you have complete experiences, your life is better, as opposed to having all this residual from the past, wreckage, pain body, as Eckhart Tolle talks. I mean, for years we've had lunches, breakfast, and I always come back to these existential questions, and you never seem to be very bothered by these things that I've been a little obsessive
Well,
about.
I think that all humans have a wish to have something continue beyond our death. I think this wish is that we survive our own death is so strong that there is a strong tendency to create belief systems that will happen. I just think it's central to human thinking,
Yeah.
but whether it's central to human thinking, whether that makes it true or not,
It's a different question.
is a totally different question.
I have no desire to think of a heaven or a hell or anything beyond death. And that makes me very happy.
You're going to go to hell.
I know.
But he'll enjoy it.
But it makes me very happy to be alive as long as I can be alive. At the point where you have to die, then you just die and you turn yourself into dust. So that you cannot say that everybody thinks that there's a
No, no,
heaven. Or
There is a universal tendency.
A body
lot
of-
of
yeah.
exceptions.
Yeah.
Because my feeling is, after we die, we're going to be the same place we were before we were born.
Yeah.
There's just nothing there. That's what I believe in. So you just enjoy Annie Hall. I just watched it again the other day. There's that scene in Annie Hall where he's ready to kill himself and he
Woody
goes into a
Allen.
movie. And to me, Woody Allen was just as brilliant in that.
Woody
scene.
Allen does deal with these existential questions.
He says, so maybe there is life after, maybe there isn't, but why not enjoy the experience while we're in it?
While we live, let's live in clover.
We're not going to come up with any answers here today,
No.
but we're going to have a good time.
No one has
doing
in thousands of years, so we're not gonna do that.
And why are we doing this? I think it gives us a degree of pleasure.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think the brain or the
stimulation,
mind is
mental
our,
stimulation.
our most fun toy.
I think everything starts with an awareness, and just go back to the consciousness thing. Starts with an awareness, and when awareness gets to a certain point, it becomes conscious.
Okay.
Animals are aware.
Okay.
When they start being able to move things, they're conscious a little bit. We have far more consciousness than animals.
I think materialism is being aware of your physical environment and feeling that, and a belief that beyond your physical environment, that abstractions such as the soul or consciousness beyond death don't exist. And I think that's possibly what a materialist is.
And again, I'm asking my question, is there ever been an argument or a position presented to you that made you sort of doubt your position, or something that was the best challenge to your materialist perspective?
Oh yes, when I was a kid, I OD'd on religion. And I think that since that time, I think having a lot of training in science and a lot of training, speculation about stuff like this, I think has changed certainly my attitudes when I was 20 from the time I am now. It was a very gradual evolution. I'd never perceived it as a single transformation like St. Paul on the road to Damascus, that I had an epiphany. I think it's gradually the ideas of science and rationality eroded my basic beliefs in religion.
And how do you view people that are religious or believe in something greater than what we just see in the material world?
I respect it. I think many of them need this to make their life meaningful. Some are very rigid about this. I have a favorite saying, which I created: "A closed mind is a terrible thing to waste." And I think that people are very rigid and closed to any new input. I think I probably do have negative reaction toward that.
Johari's window shows that, the four possibilities, that which we all know, that's what you know and I don't know, and then that which none of us know. I don't think
There's
I got
a
all
lot of-
four
lot
of
of
there,
stuff we don't
but there's a
know,
lot of
never know.
unknown. And so maybe that's the, kind of in conclusion, the idea of mystery, that we're always going to be in some realm of mystery as human beings, that's just the part of the equation of being alive and being maybe conscious, to
When
be
it-
able to appreciate the mystery.
When anthropologists do diggings and discoveries, they go back thousands of years, and they usually find religious artifacts.
Yes, amongst the Neanderthals,
Yeah. When,
incidentally, we're all about 2 to 4% Neanderthal.
Yes, I know. There was
So let's not denigrate.
intermarriage or rapes or whatever happened, yeah.
when
Intermarriage.
it goes back to the number 150, there's that magic number 150, when anthropologists find groups that used to be in the world of less than 150 people, there were no religious artifacts. They didn't believe in religion. They didn't need religion or I don't know if they needed it, but they didn't have it. Once they got bigger, once you started a group bigger than 150,
To bring some order.
then you need order.
Yeah.
And,
And-
and priests to control
Exactly.
the masses.
And fear.
Fe-
And you have
fear.
fear of God. So the way you
Which,
punish
which goes back to the survival.
it's survival.
Because
Right. What we need to
basically,
survive.
you had these small groups of people, maybe I guess 50,000 years ago or so, and it wasn't until maybe 15,000 years ago that they started to realize in reciprocity that maybe we'll let you use the water if you can grow the plants, and that to survive, it's best
Because
because they were
it's
just
best.
wandering
It
tribes.
was
yes.
beneficial to them.
Right.
It was
Yeah,
beneficial
because
to,
it goes back to
get along,
survival.
because
Yeah.
So,
it's back to
and the
survival.
Ten Commandments would be
Right.
the same thing. So again, it's realizing that altruism and it isn't just selfishness. Altruistic movements and expressions have some.
They work better
Yes.
in the long run.
Yes,
May-
yes,
May
sir.
not
Yeah.
work better
Immediate.
right now for individuals, but
in the long
Say-
So
run.
there was awareness of that
Yes.
we best we best not keep fighting with these tribes, that we're going to just kill each other. Even like with atomic weapons and things, we kind of come to the same sort of coexistence, and let's see if we can work together. So that may be true, I think.
It's
With-
just extending that
Yeah, so I
the
don't think
initial groups
it
feeling
wasn't
that
until about 15,000 years ago that I think that there started to be this kind of creation of society and more working
well, I
together.
think in a broader sense, if you look at animal behavior, there seems to be altruistic behavior
Yeah.
toward the group
towards
and
her-
hostility toward the
Yes, yeah.
out group.
it's about-
And I think without that, I don't think that certainly humans would not have survived without some altruism.
Yeah, and again, maybe that's this be able to distinguish again the inner and the outer. We talked about the beginning of the discussion, and then it's like we're the inner, we're the in group, and they're these outer sort of people. And a lot of the religions who have the golden rule are try to bring in all types of people. And now we're expanding that in our culture, where we're looking at, there aren't these outcasts like we thought with mental health as a stigma, or let's say the gay community, or people who have handicaps or whatever, so-called individuals with a so-called handicap, that we're much more inclusive than 50 years ago, because,
Oh,
we have all
absolutely.
this awareness now, so there's something about that that's hopeful, I think, about our species, our form of animalism, for
If-
John.
If our
Okay.
destructive urges do not prevail.
we may have gone over the hill. Start going down the other
Okay, well,
side.
thank you, everyone. John, thank you. Any last minute comments for animals or plants or the soil or the good
I'll
earth?
put the animal pictures in later, all the cutaways.
You put the earth there too. All right, thank you very much for being part of this experience.
Thank you.